Welcome back to the Daughters of the Moon podcast. Mom and I are so grateful that you can join us today. And we are once again kicking it kind of old school. So it's just Mom and I today. And we decided that we would do some ghost stories because just recently somebody brought that up to us in one of our podcasts that they had listened to and said they really enjoyed it. So we're going to tell some ghost stories. So Mom's got some lined up and we'll hear hers because she's got better ones than me, really.
I don't know about that. I've just been around longer, that's all. Okay, let's start. Kim reminded me tonight of one. When I was growing up, I was probably 9, 10 years old. And my stepfather at the time uh, go- rented a house, my mom and him rented a house in a small village. Anyways, when we moved into it, it was like an old hotel. And everybody that had moved into the hotel there had tried to paint it black and white. Now, I was unsure about this at my age because I was young, and did I care about how they painted the house? Not really, not at that age. But anyways, as time went on, okay, the house was just creepy all the time. You'd wake up in the night, really weird noises going on, carrying on. The house is just spooky. Anyway, this one night in particular, um, all of a sudden it just got really cold and clammy in the house. And I got up to go down to say to my mom that I didn't feel very good what was going on. She was standing out on in a sort of a closed-in patio area that was in the house. Anyway, all of a sudden, out of the sky came this light, and it came at the house, and it was coming at the house and coming at the house, and it looked like it was going to hit the house. And we actually ducked. And when we stood back up, Mom said, "Holy jeez, what the hell was that?" I said, "Oh my God, Mom, what was it?" Anyway, didn't matter how we tried to put it away and out of our minds. The phone rang. The phone rang, and my stepfather had died in a car accident. Anybody that had moved into that house had tried to paint it black and white. Anybody that had any man had died in the house. So the house was definitely haunted. And so, my stepdad at the time was another one. But one man was crushed by logs by his own truck. It started off way back when the hotel was first opened, and I guess some woman in the hotel shot her husband. And after that, it appeared that no men were welcome in that hotel, even though it was now a house sort of thing. So it's really interesting because as of today, the house is torn down and the land stands empty. So it was just one of those things that the ghost got the best of the place. So I don't know if it'll ever be um, built on again. Still, it's just a piece of land. And even the trees and everything on that property was scary and spooky. It didn't matter. It just was a spooky place, you know. So that's one of my ghost stories.
It seems like a lot of these places, like I don't know, we've talked about like where my grandma and grandpa lived, and I remember like when that house was super haunted, and you had
Oh my God.
thousands of stories about that one, and and I know we've talked about a couple of them on here, but it just seems like that house too was demolished and then never replaced. So it's
That's
interesting that these places that have these sort of negative energies or residual energies from these things just right, it's the bare land, even though the land's still creepy, kind of.
we know that because we went to the land and walked it. And when we were there that day, we had Philip with us. I think we said that last time, but
Yeah,
there was a crow that was there, and it just watched us like somebody was paying attention to us being there. And
yeah.
we walked on the land just to see what it was all about. But it even creeped Philip right out. I remember that day.
Yeah, it was kind of spooky. I know for me, like a lot of the ghosts that I experienced were like when the kids were little, I remember the one house that we lived in and I never knew what it was, but there was always the kids would see spirits in the house and you could just feel them in there. And they weren't really negative because I don't always think that, if people are checking in that it's necessarily negative energy, but they were there for sure.
Yeah, they were. The story that I wanted to say tonight too was I moved in the house. Kimmy was talking about the house just now. It's her grandparents' home. And I couldn't get a babysitter to watch my kids. The house was just so haunted all the time. And I didn't tell anybody about it because why would I? I needed to go out sometimes too. Anyways, this night in particular, I asked my brother if he would babysit. He told me, yeah, he would come over and he would babysit as long as he could to bring his buddy with him. I said, absolutely, you could. Anyways, they were sitting in the house and they were babysitting. And he gave me a call when I was out and said, you got to come home. There's something wrong. I said, okay, Barry, I'll be home, sort of thing. Anyways, when I get home, the two of them are both sitting outside. But what had happened is Barry was, I only had Kimmy at the time. Kimmy was my baby. And so he was babysitting her. And he would go upstairs to check on her. And then he, put her to bed and all that other good stuff. Anyways, all of a sudden he said she started to cry. And he said, I yelled up, okay, Kimmy, I'm coming. It's all right. Don't cry. And he said she kept crying. So he's funny because he was a teenager, right? So he goes, okay. So he gets up and he goes up the stairs and he opens up the bedroom door. And he said that when he opened up the bedroom door, he said that her head turned around in a circle and stared at him and just stared at him. And he said it scared him so bad he screamed. And he ran over and grabbed a hold of her and ran down the stairs. And by the time I got home, the two of them were sitting on the front step with Kim in their arms. And he said, I'll never babysit again in this house because this is the creepiest house I've ever been in, Barbie. And I'm never coming back because, honest to God, somebody did that to Kimmy. Somebody made her do that night. And of course, I couldn't tell him. He was just young about the other ghost stories that were going on in the house at the time. But anyways, yeah, so I had a hard time getting babysitter. It was that house just had all kinds of little things that I'd like to do.
Yeah.
The other thing, yeah, the other one I
I was
remember there was, sorry, go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. I was just gonna say with Uncle Barry, I remember years later when we moved back to Mississauga and we moved into that house, and then they came and slept overnight and slept in the living room. And when in the morning when he got up, the radio had been turning on and the French
The
doors had
door,
been opening, and he's like, "What is it with you in houses?" You're
he
like,
did.
"Oh, they just follow me."
Every house I go to, Barbie, that's yours, it's haunted. Why is that? But it did, I don't know whether it was just one of those things, and I guess they figured he wasn't a believer. They were going to make him a believer.
Yeah.
Uh, I guess they really did. They just kept opening the door and bugging him all night long. Yeah, that's true. I remember that story now too.
Yeah. That was so funny.
It's they used to like to come and see me, but they always like to try to scare me. And back in the day, it did scare me because I was young and I didn't understand what spirits could do or why they would do the things that they do. And but as time went on, and I had a good teacher because Kim's grandma was also very psychic, and she would tell me things. The time that I remember too that was really hair rising was the time that she told me she was in the house, and one of I think it was her husband's Kimmy's grandpa's uh, grandma that was upstairs, and she was passing away. Anyways, at the time it was her son, Kimmy's dad. She said he was sitting in his high chair, and she said she was feeding him lunch. And he was sitting in his high chair, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, he starts reciting the Stations of the Cross. And she said he was all of like a year and a half old. And she said when he did, he said to me, there's pictures on the wall, Mommy. Look at them. Look at the pictures on the wall. So Stella says, which is Kimmy's grandma, she says, I thought right away, oh my God, she's passing. So she said, took Bill out of the high chair, put him on the floor so he'd be safe, and I tailed it up to the top of the stairs. And when I got up there, her grandmother said to her, oh my God, Stella, did you watch all the beautiful pictures on the wall, the crucifixion? And she said it was like the hair just stood up my arms, and she says, no, I didn't see that. No, I didn't see it. And she didn't want to say what had happened. Anyways, it was not very long past that, and she did actually pass. But there was just another event that took place in the house before I even moved in. So
That one kind of makes my hair raise a little too, actually. Not gonna lie. I remember one of the first times that I remember, because I don't remember any of those things that happened when I was little, obviously, but I do remember when your grandpa died, so Grandpa Cornell. I remember, and we had to go, and we had to see the wake, and so I'm not a big fan of those. Anyways, I remember laying in bed and opening my eyes, and he was like at my door walking in. It looked like his arms were out. And I was like, oh my gosh, like what is happening here? And he's walking, and I'm like, you can't be here. And then he disappeared. So I guess at that point, I was smart enough to know that if I had said that, he'd go away. But I didn't know, like, I was like, covers up and scared the crap right out of me. I mean, now I know you can ask those things and, they will leave you alone. But it was a
but you have to know that before you can,
scary
before that
thing,
happens,
right?
right? Yeah. I don't know, like another story that I get from a ghost story is the time I had a peeping Tom at this house, same house. But at night I couldn't sleep because every night when I went to bed, I'd put Kimmy in her room, in her bed. But every night the house would get really cold, really, really cold. I'd wake up and I would go and get Kim and bring her to bed with me because I thought it was really cold in the house. And I'd get her and be laying in bed together. The house would get so cold if I pulled the covers up to her, she'd be beside me and pull the covers up over her head, look back up, you could see her breath, the cold. And it was just so eerie. Then all of a sudden, I heard this noise coming up the stairs. It was like I could hear the creak on the stairs because it's a really old house. And you could hear the creaks on the stairs as it was coming up. You knew as the stair steps were coming, you knew he was getting closer, whoever what it was getting closer to the top of the stairs. So you're laying there with the covers up to your throat with this cold air, waiting for somebody to appear at the top of the stairs in the doorway. And by the time they hit the top of the stairs, you're already so anxious and scared shitless. Pulled the covers over both of our heads, and I laid there and shivering. And finally, after a period of time, I took the covers down, and here's this man dressed in cloak, standing at the end of the bed with his eyes staring at it, with the cold air coming out of his mouth. And I put the covers back over our head and said, just go away, just go away, just go away, just go away. And the holding Kimmy. And all of a sudden it started getting warm. Pulled the covers back down off my head and it was gone. But this happened quite frequently in this house. It wasn't just one night this occurred. And so Kim got so that she stuck in my bed with me quite often because her dad was always gone to work somewhere. It seemed like at night. But at the same time, like you were saying, I had a peeping Tom at the same time. And anyways, so when I would be downstairs, put baby to bed, go downstairs, be watching TV, and I would see somebody peeping in my window. And I think, oh, for God's sakes. And so I finally told my husband about it and whatnot. Anyways, when I got up in the morning every day, it was like, open up the front door. I couldn't wait for the sunshine to be there. And I was so excited. And this day in particular, I opened up the front door and here's this knife sticking out of my window on the what do you call it, in between the windows because it was so old. Yeah, the window pane. And I screamed. I couldn't believe it was there. And I went over. I was so upset and so angry. I pulled the knife out of the, the pane or the out of the wood. And when I did, I broke it in pieces. It was so old. And when I told my husband about it, he said, "You couldn't have possibly broken it. How would they ever got in the window?" I said, "Indeed, indeed."
That's what I'm saying.
That's what I'm saying. Like there's ghosts here, and they can do shit that we can't do, right? And uh, and so I just never knew what I was going to get, between hearing footsteps in the living room, Kimmy watching footsteps going across the living room floor when she was in her playpen, um, you know, things like that. There was always some kind of a ghost that was happening in that house. I just loved that house. So I'm not surprised there's no house or anything on that property today
Hmm.
because of that.
I remember even as a kid, like going there and just being, it was just creepy, right? Like they had that big grate on the one floor there, and it just was, yeah, it just kind of gave you the.
It
So
really
I
did.
don't know how you lasted that long because I don't know that I could have.
I think it was because we were young and we didn't have a lot of money, right? We just had a baby and we were very young. And, you know, there wasn't just enough money to move around a lot. So you sort of had to stay where you stay put.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, uh, the only thing that sort of kept my sanity at the time was the fact Kimmy's grandma would say, "Oh, yeah, dear, that house is haunted." So it made me know that I wasn't crazy
Yeah,
and that I wasn't seeing things that weren't real because she told me too that, "Oh, yeah, there's lots of things in that house that aren't real, um, that the things that happen there."
yeah.
So, another story I remember, I don't know if I told this last time, I was in the kitchen and I was doing dishes. Kimmy was in the playpen and she started to cry. And I thought, okay, I'll just finish these dishes and then I'll go out there and everything will be fine. And when I came out, turned around the corner, all of a sudden she stopped crying. So I turned around, went around the corner to look at her. And I look at her and she's looking out in front of her. She's seeing a vision of somebody in front of her and she's staring out in front. And I look down and there's footprints. It's like somebody's leaving indents in the floor, walking towards her playpen. And I was like beyond myself. Didn't know what to do at first. And she's just standing there like she's afraid too, because she doesn't know who it is. She's just little. And so I ran and grabbed a hold of her. And we sat out in the front step until her dad got home that day because it was like, I'm not going back in there. There's just no way I'm going back in there. There's just something in there and it doesn't want, and it's not getting my baby.
Yeah. Well, I
So I
remember
remember
the house that we bought from you, and in in Tofield there, I remember because so down in the basement, it was kind of creepy down in that basement. So it was
it
funny
was
because my youngest, Philip, he moved downstairs to have his bedroom down there, and then there was a spare bedroom, so all his friends would sleep in the spare bedroom, sort of. But then they'd get up, they'd sleep overnight, and then they're like, I don't think I can sleep in that bedroom anymore. I'm like, why? What's wrong? Well, across from it was a pantry, and there's some man that stares at me from the pantry, and he watched them on the couch, and I think the one time he touched one of his friends, and yeah, it was just a thing. And it was so funny because I was like, this is so weird. And then so years later, when I was talking to my ex, he was still in the house and his girlfriend, and she's like, yeah, so there's a man in the basement that's super creepy. It's like, I know.
the pantry was always
So,
creepy. That
yeah, so like it's funny, right? Because it's different people, and yet everybody's seeing these same and feeling these different things, right? So,
that's right. That's right. I know there's I know that one time I had my niece babysit for me, and because I couldn't get my brother to babysit anymore. And I hadn't really told anybody the stories about the house because, I just haven't. And because, I mean, my thing was they were only bothering me most of the time. And anyways, she come to babysit for me. And anyways, wasn't gone very long again. And she gave me a call and said, where I was, you need to come home right now. I'm crying and I'm upset. And so I go, okay. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, geez, no, don't be that, and I hope your kids are okay. Kimmy's okay. Oh yeah. You know, so I get home. She's sitting on the front steps. She hands me Kimmy and she says, I'm going home and I'm never coming back here again ever. And I said, wait, what? She said, because there's something in your house and it kept making noises and it kept making all these weird noises, she said. And and I felt like they were touching me. And she said the baby would look out into space and nothing was there. And she said, finally, she said, I saw somebody walking across the floor, sort of the same thing I had seen, the indents on the floor. And she said, I saw those. And she said, I've never gone back in and I'm never visiting ever either. So I couldn't get her to babysit either.
It's hard to
Um,
hard to keep friends in that house.
it just seemed like it didn't want anybody else. And same as I had a bedroom there that never was warm. And there would be flies all the time in the window.
You said you had that one girl that moved in with you and was creeped right out because there was always dead flies and
The room is freezing. It didn't matter how many clothes or how many sheets or pillows and everything else we put under bed. She'd get up and she'd say, I'm freezing in that room. And I'd say, I don't know why, because, you know, it shouldn't be cold, right? And a nice sun in the window and everything. And she just says, I'm freezing. And the damn door won't stay closed. Doesn't matter how I try, I can't get that door to stay closed. And it was weird because the door had a hook and eye on. And it was the same thing it was with me when I was before the room was anybody was in it. I would go up the stairs, put Kimmy to bed, go up the stairs to go back and get her later. And when I would up there, I would close the door and lock it, hook and eye. And when I went back up to get her, it would be wide open and the hook and eye would be open. And it didn't matter when it was all the time. And so the door just didn't like to be closed. So the girl that was living there, she finally said, I can't live here anymore because this house is too haunted and it's too cold. So she moved out because of it. So it's just one of those houses that only like what it like.
yeah, for
You
sure.
know,
It'd be interesting to actually research that house, just to find out what, kind of like that one girl that we interviewed was saying, like it's nice to know the history of the house of who lived there and maybe, what like did something happen over time or was it just enough deaths and enough people that just were like, I'm attached to this house and
I
quit
think,
shutting my door, right?
yeah, well, I know the one in Bridgenorth, the one that when I was a kid, that was painted black and white. Um, I know that my stepdad started painting it black and white, and that's when it happened to him. But I mean, yeah, somebody had been murdered in the house, so I guess being in a hotel too, right, would be
Mhm.
that one. As far as your grandma's place where we were, I don't know. I just think it had a woolen mills that was beside it, and everybody used to talk about how they saw the people flying. It caught fire one time, and a bunch of people died in it. And people talked all the time about how they saw people running around the building still on fire, which was only like a stone throw from the house. So, it could have even have been that because of the association so close.
Mhm.
Um, that's part of the reason why people were still trying to go there because it would be a house where you could go for help, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because right beside it was a woolen mill. Excuse me. So I think that you know that could have been part of that story. Plus, they'd owned that house forever, and they'd had two other grandparents die in that house. So I think everybody was just sticking around.
Yeah. This wanted to be there. Maybe it was my grandpa walking across the floor. Okay, I'm gonna just come check you out, little kid. I just remember him telling me stories when we were kids, like my brother and and I remember like always, even still, the hair is just like on your arms, right? When you hear them, just because
And I still get goosebumps telling them, and sometimes get tears in my eyes too, because the reality of it is still so real.
hmm
And sometimes, and I'm not a good storyteller, obviously, because did I make your hair stand up your arm this time too? The thing is, you know, if you spend the time and really put the story into it, and all the little scary things, I probably scare the lips out of you. Um, but I mean, it was just scary. There was always things falling, always things moving. The house just had its own personality, and it wanted you to know that it had its own personality. And because I was so young and I didn't know what to believe at the time, um, it was just terrifying. You know,
Yeah.
it just was. You know,
Yeah. Would have
but
been
yeah,
cool if it would have lasted and you could have had like a ghost hunter in there to check it out just to hear the stories that they would come up with, right?
I would love that. Yeah, it would.
Especially
You
if
know,
it
I
was
mean,
like a like because I think a lot of these like Peterborough for sure has a lot of these really old time houses and I think you know whether you want to call them haunted or rather you just want to say that there's beings in these places. I think they are just because they're so old and they got that history and the story that goes with them and back in the day, right? People got sick and died in these houses and so I think they all kind of, and with that residual thing, especially so close together, who knows? That crazy.
and I think too, it was a place where during the war, machinery and guns and everything like that was being made in Peterborough, and so there was a lot of men that were gone overseas and things like that to fight for us, and a lot of women left alone there too, right? Well, their men were gone, and so a lot of things happened, and a lot of men didn't return from the war. Well, not in person, but I think a lot of them came back. A lot of them came back afterwards spiritually to reconnect with their loved ones that they had left behind, but they never had a chance to come back and see, right?
hmm
So it's Peterborough has a lot of history that way too. For I mean, lots of things, ghost stories happened to me in Peterborough. It seemed to be one of those places, but they followed me out west here too, so that's okay.
Yeah, they do tend to like you. So, which I mean is good because we'll probably get more ghost stories before it's all over and done with.
You bet. You bet. Let's try to do that. I
Yes,
know that people enjoy hearing them, particularly from people that are people, real people telling the stories, sort of thing. So yeah,
yes, exactly. Well, I appreciate you sharing all yours because I didn't have a whole lot. I was thinking about ones to share and maybe they'll come to me. They'll probably come to me after this and I'll be like, oh, why didn't I tell that
oh,
one? But then we can have another one down the road and do it. And, but I'm so glad that we did this. It was awesome kicking it old school with you
it was Kimmy. Thank you.
and thank you everybody for tuning in. We're so grateful that you join us every week and you share with your friends and your families. And for sure, make sure you let us know if you have any questions. If you're local and you need a house clearing, Mom is
We
the
do that.
lady to call. She's super good at it. I will accompany her. I'm not quite there yet on doing it on my own, but she's definitely the girl to call for that. And yeah, other than that, I guess we'll see you all next week.
You bet you will.